Welcome back to my channel. It's me. The mind of a serial killer is an enigma that has fascinated and horrified people for centuries. What could drive someone to commit such heinous acts? How do they think, plan, and execute their crimes? In this video, we'll be taking a deep dive into the minds of some of the most notorious serial killers in history and exploring the psychological factors that make them tick. Please note that this content is meant for educational purposes only and does not in any way endorse or encourage the actions of these individuals. Let's begin. Ted Bundy, one of the most infamous serial killers of the 20th century, was known for his charisma and good looks. Despite his seemingly normal appearance, Bundy had a dark side that he kept hidden from the public. He was able to lure his victims into his car by pretending to have a broken arm and needed help, or by posing as a police officer. Bundy would then take his victims to secluded areas and beat them over the head with a heavy object before strangling them to death. He was also known to engage in necrophilia, which means he had sex with the corpses of his victims. Bundy was eventually caught and executed in the electric chair in 1989. His case remains one of the most studied in criminal psychology, and experts continue to try and understand what could have led him to commit such horrific crimes. John Wayne Gacy, also known as the Killer Clown, was a serial killer who targeted young men in the 1970s. Gacy was active in his local community, often performing as a clown at children's parties and charitable events. But behind this facade, he was a brutal murderer who would lure his victims to his home, where he would torture, rape, and strangle them before burying them in the crawl space of his house. Gacy was eventually caught when a police officer discovered the bodies of several teenagers in the crawl space. He was convicted of 21 murders and sentenced to death by lethal injection in 1994. During his trial, it was revealed that Gacy had suffered from a traumatic childhood, including physical and sexual abuse, which may have contributed to his violent behavior. Jeffrey Dahmer, the Milwaukee Monster, was a serial killer and sex offender who targeted black men in the 1970s and 80s. Dahmer would lure his victims to his home by offering them money or drugs, where he would then drug them and strangle them to death. He was also known to engage in cannibalism and would dismember the bodies of his victims and keep their remains as trophies. Dahmer was eventually caught when one of his victims escaped and alerted the police. He was convicted of 15 murders and sentenced to 15 life sentences in prison. However, he was later beaten to death by another inmate in 1994. Experts believe that Dahmer suffered from a number of mental disorders, including schizoid personality disorder and substance-induced psychosis, which likely contributed to his gruesome crimes. Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, was a serial killer who terrorized Los Angeles in the 1980s. Ramirez went on a crime spree that lasted for 13 months, during which he committed a series of assaults, murders, and even attempted murders. He was known to target elderly victims and would often break into their homes and attack them in their beds. Ramirez was also a Satanist, and some of his crimes were ritualistic in nature. He was eventually caught and convicted of 13 counts of murder and 30 other felonies. Ramirez was sentenced to death and spent the rest of his life in prison until his death from complications related to HIV/AIDS in 2013. Dennis Rader, the BTK Killer, was a serial killer who operated in Wichita, Kansas between 1974 and 1991. Rader got his nickname from the way he communicated with the police, binding, torturing, and killing his victims. He would often target families and would use a variety of weapons to carry out his crimes, including knives, guns, and even an axe. Rader was finally caught in 2005 after a hiatus in his killings when he sent a letter to the police department with a floppy disk containing a digital file of him. He was convicted of 10 counts of murder and is currently serving 10 consecutive life sentences in prison. Now let's move on to some lesser-known but equally terrifying serial killers. Aileen Wuornos, a prostitute and drug addict, was a serial killer who targeted men in Florida. In the early 1990s, she would pick up men in her car and then take them to isolated areas where she would rob and shoot them. Wuornos claimed that all of her victims had attacked or attempted to rape her, but this has never been confirmed. She was convicted of 6 murders and sentenced to death. Her case raised questions about the role of victimization in shaping an individual's behavior and whether or not Wuornos was justified in her actions. The Beaumont children, 3 siblings from Australia who vanished in 1966. The case remains one of the most perplexing unsolved mysteries in Australian history. Despite numerous theories and suspect persons of interest, The whereabouts of the children are still unknown. Their disappearance shocked the nation and sparked one of the largest manhunts in Australia's history. However, despite extensive investigations and media attention, the case remains open and the mystery of what happened to the Beaumont children continues to haunt the country. The Zodiac Killer, a serial killer who operated in Northern California in the late 1960s and early 1970s. The killer was known for sending cryptic messages and ciphers to the police and media outlets, taunting them with clues to his identity. Despite extensive investigations, the Zodiac Killer's true identity has never been confirmed, and the case remains one of the most famous, unsolved mysteries of the era. The Texarkana Moonlight Murders, a series of brutal crimes that took place in Texarkana, Texas in the 1940s. A mysterious assailant known as the Phantom Killer terrorized the town, attacking couples in parked cars and leaving them wounded or dead. Despite a massive manhunt, the killer was never caught, and the case remains one of the most chilling, unsolved mysteries in American history. The Jack the Ripper Murders, a series of gruesome killings that took place in London's Whitechapel district in 1888. Unidentified killer targeted women working as prostitutes and mutilated their bodies. The case shocked the Victorian era and remains one of the most infamous unsolved mysteries in history. What do you think about these killers? Which one scared you the most? Comment below if you want to learn more about any of these cases. We'll link to more information in the description. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. Thanks for watching. See you next time.